around 200,000 people have been ordered to leave the EU in 2024 so far. The number of repatriation orders, however, went down by around 10% from the second quarter of 2023 to the second quarter of 2024. France issued the highest number of repatriation orders, deporting around 3,800 people from the EU, followed by Germany and Sweden. The number of migrants ordered to leave, however, largely exceeds those who are actually repatriated. Out of 96,000 migrants who received the repatriation order, less than a third actually left the EU. Algerians and Moroccans received the most repatriation orders, each accounting for 7% of the total. However, if we look only at those who were actually repatriated, the largest groups returned were Georgians, Albanians, and Turkish.
Breaking news, something that we've been following all day long. A standoff now at this point with SWAT. This is in Hawthorne. Skyfox up and over this live picture. Police confirmed it is the person connected to a shooting on the campus of Santa Monica College. Fox 11's Haley Winslow. She's live on the scene of that standoff, and she joins us live from the ground now with more. Haley?
Marla and Alex, yes, Santa Monica police spokeswoman confirms that this is that shooting suspect from last night at the Santa Monica College campus. And she also confirms to me that this was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There were rumors that he was shot by police, but that is not the case. Still a very large scene here involving multiple police agencies. They're going to be here investigating for much of the night here in Hawthorne on Aviation Boulevard and El Segundo Boulevard. We'll show you much of the action from wild Skyfox video. SWAT officers pointing assault rifles at the suspect, and then once they confirm that the driver is dead and there's no more threat, one of those officers reaches his hand inside the black sedan to grab the gun, and you can see that handgun on the roof of the car. Now, the car's pointed the wrong way on Aviation Boulevard because it was pinned in by those squad cars and armored vehicles. All of this started at 3 p.m. Investigators say the shooting yesterday at 9:50 p.m. was a workplace violence, not a random act. All Santa Monica College campuses were closed today, and all employees had the day off as the college, of course, responds to this tragic event. Now, that man is still in the vehicle, and investigators still here taking pictures of all of the evidence. Meanwhile, the Santa Monica College employee at the hospital tonight in critical condition. Reporting live here in Hawthorne, I'm Haley Winslow, Fox 11 News.
Relations between India and Canada are at a low point as the countries expelled each other's top diplomats over an ongoing dispute about the killing of a Sikh activist in Canada. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was killed in June 2023 in British Columbia. Canada says it has identified India's top diplomat as the person of interest in the assassination plot and expelled him and 5 other diplomats Monday. India has rejected the accusations as absurd. In response, it expelled Canada's acting High Commissioner and 5 other diplomats. Experts say the diplomatic standoff between India and Canada can make it difficult for both the countries to move forward. Experts also say the relationship between the two countries appears to be on a life support.
When floods ripped through parts of Europe in September, the scale of the destruction took people by surprise. These intense rains were predicted by sophisticated forecasting systems enhanced with artificial intelligence. But forewarned did not mean forearmed. Though the rains were accurately predicted, the effects in the deluged areas were not. And this highlights the difficulties of dealing with ever more common extreme weather. AI has supercharged weather forecasting using a range of statistical tools to analyze years of historical data and predict patterns, and that too at a lower cost than traditional numerical weather predictions. Now, AI technology can create more specific predictions ahead of events such as urban flooding or in complex terrain such as mountainous areas. But there are still gaps in knowledge in how the information is used and in investment to strengthen data gathering models. One issue is that the effectiveness of an AI model is only as good as the information it is fed. If there is little input data, or extreme events happen more frequently at different times of the year or in different regions, weather disasters become more challenging to predict. Now, since January, the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts has been using the artificial intelligence forecasting system. This data-driven forecasting model makes multiple predictions rapidly and delivers long-term forecasts of weather events like cyclones and heat waves. The center's readings ahead of the September floods were accurate, but even with accurate forecasts, communication is key, especially in an era when climate change means extreme weather is becoming more frequent. A report from the European Environment Agency has warned that Europe faces urgent climate risks that are outpacing policies and adaptation actions. Extreme heat, drought, wildfires, and flooding will worsen in Europe even under optimistic global warming scenarios and will affect living conditions throughout the continent. Some tech entrepreneurs say Europe is not ready. Data processing is also a challenge because these complex AI models need to run updates every hour as forecasts change, and that requires both a lot of computing power and a lot of time, especially at more minute scales. High computing power also means huge amounts of energy and water are needed as well, which makes AI models part of the problem because they are adding to the planet heating emissions, driving the climate emergency.
Meantime, more than 90 people are still unaccounted for in North Carolina, nearly 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene. Thousands more still don't have power or water in rural areas. FEMA says it's working overtime to help communities in the state, but officials say this will be a long and expensive recovery.
The recovery will be long, and we will be with Western North Carolina every step of the way.
I guess it'll take years, honestly, for this to be taken care of in this area. Just rebuilding things and getting things back to normal.
So far, more than 170,000 people have applied for assistance, and nearly $100 million has been given directly to survivors. Hundreds of people, though, are still living in shelters.
Reporting how many still remain unaccounted for 17 days after the storm is difficult at best. News 13 investigative reporter Jennifer Emmert explains why the state does not have an accurate count and why that's left many families waiting for answers.
As the volunteers and rescue squads who mobilized in the days following Helene wind down, finding out who's still unaccounted for can be tough.
He loves it up there.
It's been 17 days since Katie Trena's family has heard from her brother Christopher.
He kind of bounces around the Asheville area, kind of just exploring the area.
Trena's family based in Florida was in touch with Chris days before the storm. He had a cell phone, but since the storm, nothing.
We just have to be hopeful and grateful that the time will come and that we'll find him.
They've shared his picture on social media and reported him missing to the United Way and Red Cross. They're grateful for local, state, and federal search efforts and thousands of volunteer hours from organizations like the Buncombe County Rescue Squad.
There were thousands of cases that the Register of Deeds worked. We had less than 200 that made the escalated list.
Escalated because of the conditions.
Those are the ones that, there was a landslide, so you couldn't access. The bridge was washed out, so you had to hike in.
The majority they were able to locate.
The majority of them were either well cared for because they were, number one, prepared. They might be unaccounted for because they haven't been able to communicate with the outside world.
Those they couldn't reach remain on a list, now in the hands of the sheriff's office. That's where knowing how many still remain unaccounted for gets tricky. So many groups aided in the effort and have taken reports.
You've got the Asheville Police Department, you've got the Black Mountain Police Department, you've got the Sheriff's Department, you've got the State Bureau of Investigation. We had federal search and rescue, state search and rescue, local search and rescue.
Each had their own list, and until now, no one's tried to combine them or narrow it down.
We're getting to the point where we will have one list, but we're just not quite there yet.
That will take time, verifying each agency's list against the others and comparing them with the medical examiner's office. Time that seems like an eternity for families waiting for word.
Any information would be super helpful, and obviously if anyone sees or spots him, just telling him that we're all searching for him back home. He's got a large support group.
For information and resources on individuals still unaccounted for, head over to our website at WLOS.com. In Asheville,
now, nature has always been our ally in fighting climate change. Our oceans, our forests and soils, the planet's natural carbon sinks have absorbed about half of all human carbon emissions to maintain Earth's equilibrium. Each night, billions of marine creatures rise to feed, storing carbon deep within the ocean. On land, forests, plants and soils have quietly locked away carbon for centuries. But as the Earth heats up, this natural balance is starting to fracture. According to an international team of researchers, in 2023, the hottest year ever recorded, we witnessed a shocking breakdown of land carbon sinks. For the first time, forests and soil absorb almost no carbon. Oceans, which have soaked up 90% of the warmth from fossil fuel emissions, are showing signs of strain. Melting sea ice exposes algae-eating organisms to more sunlight, potentially keeping them in deeper waters. This disruption hinders carbon storage on the ocean floor. The mighty rainforests that once removed more carbon than they emitted are in peril. Meanwhile, the Amazon faces record-breaking drought, and in Southeast Asia, once thriving forests have turned into carbon emitters. These changes are happening faster than we ever expected. Our climate models, built on the idea that nature would always be there to absorb our carbon debt, did not account for this sudden breakdown. As temperatures rise and extreme weather intensifies, our natural carbon sinks, which we rely on to reach net zero, are losing their strength. With forests and soils in trouble and oceanic absorption weakening, we face an unpredictable future. If these sinks fail, global heating will accelerate beyond our most drastic predictions. Without healthy carbon sinks, our path to curbing climate change becomes steeper and more dangerous.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen welcomed the 6 West Balkan states to Berlin on Monday as part of the 10-year Berlin Process Summit. The Berlin Process aims to bring countries such as Serbia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Albania and North Macedonia together to sign agreements to enable them to become full EU member states. 5 out of 6 agreements were signed, and restrictions on export from Serbia to Kosovo were lifted. Scholz underlined that the states could only join together, despite some of them likely to meet conditions quicker than the others. He encouraged the states to help each other out. Montenegro is seen as the first promising country to be integrated to Europe, despite the process beginning more than 20 years ago. Whilst Montenegro expects to meet all the requirements before 2028, Scholz said he hopes the whole process would be complete before 2030. But with Ukraine and Moldova's memberships to the EU being accelerated since Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, it's likely to leave a sour taste in the mouth of the 6 Balkan states. Liv Stroud in Berlin.
Judy, Donald Trump was engaging but also combative at times during an hour-long interview with the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg. In what appeared to be a rather friendly audience at a downtown hotel, Trump stood his ground on his economic policies and immigration, often getting frequent cheers. In an interview that started 48 minutes late, Donald Trump getting a warm welcome and a standing ovation.
I like that crowd. That's a nice group of people.
Speaking during a luncheon hosted by the Economic Club of Chicago, Trump unabashedly defended his America First plan that calls for high tariffs on some foreign trade.
We're going to bring the companies back. We're going to lower taxes still further for companies that are going to make their product in the USA. We're going to protect those companies with strong tariffs because I'm a believer in tariffs.
A consensus of economists have criticized that plan, saying tariffs will increase inflation, raise the national debt, and hurt consumers. But Trump dismissed those concerns. Supporters hoping if Trump is elected, he will use tariffs judiciously.
I'm an economics major by trade, so tariffs are, they're usually a bad thing. I like them to create some fairness and some, a level playing field, not necessarily to punish.
Trump was questioned about the potential negative economic impact of his mass deportation plan for undocumented immigrants, his response drawing perhaps the loudest cheer of the day.
I want a lot of people to come into our country, but I want them to come in legally. I don't want to have murderers.
I do like his policies. I like what he's talking about. Is it going to be as easy to execute as he says it is? I don't know about that. But for the most part, that is kind of what the crowd wanted to hear.
Trump once again downplayed the events of January 6th when asked about whether he supports a peaceful transfer of power, which he would not commit to.
We want to have honest elections. You think the last election was honest?
Trump was asked if, as a businessman, he would hire a 78-year-old to be CEO, and he said yes. He said cognitive tests are important, and he claimed Kamala Harris would not pass one. And with inflation a big concern to voters, Trump advocated for presidential input on interest rates, currently determined by the Federal Reserve.
I think I have the right to say I think you should go up or down a little bit. I don't think I should be allowed to order it, but I think I have the right to put in comments.
Vice President Kamala Harris was also invited to speak at some point in front of the club, but she has not yet accepted the invitation. Trump's plans were roundly criticized today by both Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson. And coming up at 6 tonight, I'm going to tell you what he had to say about Vladimir Putin and whether he talked to him, as well as, and this was interesting, what states he thinks are going to determine this election.
North Korean troops are now fighting alongside Russians in Ukraine, with South Korea blowing the whistle on this development while Ukrainians began finding their bodies. And North Korea is believed to have supplied half of large caliber weapons used this year by Russia. Also, in a strange turn of events, South Korea is now the largest supplier of shells to Ukraine after the U.S. And this coming as the U.S. has now accused China of aiding Russia. Additionally, Ukraine has struck several Russia depots deep in the country this week, including one that contained over 400 Iranian drones. Russia reportedly continues to fire indiscriminately into Ukraine, killing 600 civilians and wounding nearly 3,000 in the past 3 months. And this as Russian forces continue to gain ground in Ukraine, though they're not huge advances, but technically they've advanced.
North Korea has claimed that around 1.4 million young people have applied to join or return to its military following accusations that South Korea provoked a near-war situation with a drone incursion. According to the state-run KCNA news agency, the young volunteers, including students and youth officials, expressed their readiness to fight in what they termed a sacred war against their southern neighbor. The report was accompanied by images purportedly showing youths signing petitions to enlist. This surge in enlistment comes as tensions on the Korean peninsula reach new heights, with North Korea accusing Seoul of actions that could lead to full-scale conflict. Though the reclusive state has made similar claims in the past, including reports of 800,000 volunteers during a standoff with the United States last year, independent verification of these enlistment numbers remains elusive. Analysts caution that such figures are likely inflated for propaganda purposes. North Korea's military capabilities are vast, with over 1 million active soldiers and several million reservists. However, many of its reserve forces, such as the Worker Peasant Red Guard, are reportedly under-equipped. Despite these limitations, Pyongyang continues to project a combative stance, frequently alluding to its readiness for war. Adding to the rising tension, North Korea recently destroyed parts of inter-Korean roads and rail lines near the heavily fortified border with South Korea. This act followed Pyongyang's earlier announcement that it would sever all cross-border infrastructure and fortify its positions, signaling a push toward a two-state system, effectively abandoning hopes of reunification. The conflict between the two Koreas has not seen a formal end since the Korean War in the early 1950s, which concluded with an armistice rather than a peace treaty. North Korea's accusations of South Korean drone incursions, as well as disputes over balloons launched from both sides, have exacerbated the situation in recent months. Meanwhile, North Korea's latest threats, including statements that Seoul would be wiped off the map in the event of war, have further fueled fears of escalation. Meanwhile, international observers continue to monitor the situation closely, wary of the potential for further provocations in an already volatile region.